Good evening, everybody. First, I'd like to thank the organizing committee of the 大众佛学会. I think English is public. Yeah. Let me see the for organizing this event and inviting me. In fact, I feel extremely happy because I can claim that I've had much connection with this society, and I started giving some talks. Not in this new premise. I'm very extremely pleased to see that big, huge improvement, achievement that you have got now. But in the oldest days, something like more than three decades ago, I have given quite a number of talks here. So I'm happy to be back with all of you. And let us hope that our karmic connection, affinity, will continue to develop in the future, right? In the area of the propagation of the Dharma. Today, the topic I've chosen is Vidya. Sorry, there are many typos always in my books and my articles. Vidyācaraṇa, the Buddhist ideal of the integration of knowing and being. I have chosen this topic partly because I think many of you know, recently I have set up a little center in Kuala Lumpur, and in collaboration with the San Bao Tang Temple, offering postgraduate courses affiliated to the University of Kelaniya. And I decided to name the little center Vidyācaraṇa Buddhist Resource. Yeah. So people have asked me why I have chosen this. What I'm trying to emphasize with that name. The other, perhaps more important reason is that it is my own personal conviction and belief that Buddhist learning, let me put it this way, and Buddhist practice should be integrated. And in the past, people have looked at me as a kind of scholar. Especially, I was teaching in the university as a professor, and then in Sri Lanka for many years, and then in University of Hong Kong, and now in Renmin Daxue, and so on. And they like to call you 学问生, which I'm afraid I do not like very much. Yeah, and just like the way they address, they call Venerable Master Yin Shun. 学问生, kind of insinuating that perhaps that we are just 搞学问的, we are just into academic studies. I want to emphasize that for me, Buddhist studies is not divorced from Buddhist praxis, and they should not, in fact, be exclusive, mutually exclusive. So I want to highlight this point. And that's why in Hong Kong, after I retired from the University of Hong Kong, I set up another little center that has been functioning for, I think, nearly 8 years, which I named the Buddha-Dharma Center of Hong Kong. At the beginning, my many well-intentioned students from the University of Hong Kong suggested that, Professor, you should start not a center like this, you should start an institute of higher Buddhist research, higher studies. So I said, that's not for me. I want a Buddhist center, I want to emphasize the Dharma. And to cut the story short, I have if you like, a slogan, 学佛而佛学，佛学而学佛. I leave it to you to figure out the meaning of this. I think it's simple enough. Yeah. So this has been my emphasis and my conscious intention to as myself as one involved in Buddhist teachings and research for a long time, to highlight this, the ideal of integrating Buddhist studies and Buddhist practice. I believe that this is in fact the ideal in Buddhism itself from the beginning. If you look at, say for instance, the teaching of the 5 indriyas, the 5 spiritual faculties. I hope you are following what I'm talking about, right? Wuken. So you see that it's an ideal of integration. You have you have faith, and you have understanding or wisdom at this highest level. You have vigor, spiritual vigor, and you have samadhi. I'm going to talk about the significance of samadhi, so I don't translate that term. And you have mindfulness. So it's an ideal of integration. Yeah. And today I don't have time to digress too much, but you see the Buddha's emphasis of the path of the integration of the personality. If you want to ask whether Buddhism has a theory, has an ideal of personality development, I would say yes, and it is the ideal of integration. Yeah. And especially when you come to, for instance, Abhidharma, you know that, and Yogacara and all these so-called Buddhist schools, you see that Buddhist studies are given a due place, due respect, due emphasis. Yeah. At the same time, essentially, they are systems of practice and realization. Yeah. So this ideal is very much underscored by the word Vidyācaraṇa. For those who know Chinese, I think in the early days when I began to give talks here, I gave all my talks only in Mandarin. I think today is the first time I came back here to speak in English. Yeah. I think you know Chinese very well. You know the Chinese term for this? Ming, Xing, Zhu. You'll see the Chinese soon. Yeah. So, it's one of the important epithets of the Buddha. You chant the so-called 10 epithets, or 9 according to the Theravada tradition, praising the Buddha, and one of them is Vidyācaraṇa. That is the Pali form. So I use the Sanskrit form, not in a sectarian sense, not denying the importance of the Pali tradition, but I believe that using Sanskrit forms in this context can be an approach of inclusiveness. Yeah. Okay. So as I said, the Buddha has been, you can see the Chinese and the Sanskrit and the Pali now. I'm not going to talk about the languages, just to highlight this. For those who know the Chinese, Ming, Xing, Zhu. This Zhu doesn't mean the foot. It means Juzhu, fully endowed. So you can see the Pali and Sanskrit, Sampanna, fully or perfectly. The Sam means, emphasizes that, endowed in Vidya and Charana. Vidya represents the aspect of understanding, right? You can say to which Buddhist studies fall under. Buddhist studies is much more, or Vidya is certainly much more than just intellectual study. I'm going to talk about it. But it can be subsumed under this aspect, the understanding aspect. Yeah, when you talk about understanding in Buddhism, you must understand that, as I said, Buddhism doesn't deny the place of intellectual studies. You have to start from where you are. Especially in the modern time, most of you who are here are intellectually inclined. Yeah? And you have the urge to understand things intellectually as the world advances. You can't deny that. Psychologically. So Buddhism gives due place to this. You need to know, you need to inquire, you need to even doubt and clarify your doubts. As I say, at the same time, you don't do Buddhist study for the sake of just Buddhist studies. You study Buddhism because you want to understand the Buddha's teaching, because you want to practice it, because you want to achieve the same goal as taught by the Buddha in the sutras. So this is the idea of Vidyācaraṇa or Vidyācaraṇa. So when I name my little center Vidyācaraṇa Center, I think Buddhists should understand that it means a Buddhist center. It means a center. I name it in Chinese, 明行学处. It's a place to learn the Buddhist path of integration of Buddhist studies, right, through Buddhist practice through Buddhist studies. So when the Buddha is eulogized, is praised as Vidyācaraṇa Sampanna, it means that he is one who is perfectly integrated in terms of understanding and practice. You can say that for him, in his case, knowing and being are one. But this is not the case for an ordinary being. You know, today there's a lot of concern and talk about the phenomena of depression. I learned that term only after going to Hong Kong. Yeah, basically, of course, I knew about the English word. I didn't know what it meant. For the people who are into the Buddhist in the Buddhist movements at that time, I realized then later on that many said they came to Buddhism because they feel depressed. They have depression. They have to overcome the depressions. Of course, I don't want to oversimplify the whole issue of depression. I understand that it is probably partly biological. There's a genetic factor there. But I think that, right, to a large extent, right, the over-concerned, concerned about the so-called depression is an importation from the modern West. You import many labels and notions and concerns and problems, and you problematize them in the context of Asian Buddhism. And you begin to feel that I'm depressed, I have this, I have that, and then you label all your psychological problems according to Western modern psychology and psychotherapy. You feel that you are having those kind of problems more and more as you begin to label and become conditioned consciously and unconsciously by this kind of Western conditioning. What I'm saying is that in the context of this question of depression, I think one important solution that you can see in Buddhism is not to follow the Western way of dealing with only the symptoms, and you must understand that depression is a common human experience. We all go through depressions. We go up and down. Yeah, but people never label them like this, and of course there's a possible constructive aspect of understanding any psychological phenomena, yeah, and psychological issues of human beings, and I recognize that, I accept that, but when you begin to theorize too much, you see, and especially to kind of perceive this perspective, you can fall into the trap. Yeah, and so to overcome depression, I believe, one should not just simply look out for clinical psychotherapy, yeah, a therapeutic treatment, and taking this kind of pills, that kind of pills. Well, you need them when the issue is very pressing for you. But you must understand you have the treasure, the Dharma, to help you. You must look into the Dhamma, look into the Buddha's own example, life and example, to find out solutions for modern human beings. Human beings are human beings, whether you're modern or ancient. We all have greed, hatred, ignorance, we all have emotions. As I said, we all have depressions. When I look at the case of the Buddha, yeah, I feel that in fact he experienced very acute and serious depression before his renunciation. He was so depressed when he went out, and in the story of the so-called four sights, when he saw as if for the first time a sick person, and then next a person who grows old, or then somebody who dies. Yeah. So each time when he saw a phenomenon like this, he went back to the village and he was very depressed. Very, very depressed. Because he realized that even the king, cannot escape the fact of impermanence. He will grow old, he will fall sick, he will die. We call this existential anguish that we saw in the Buddha. So I'm sure he was very depressed. But he didn't begin to label, and then with all the conceptually constructed theories, and explanations. He experienced it, and experienced it very productively. And finally, he saw a recluse, yeah? And then he realized they have found a solution. In fact, that, he can get out of that depression. Everybody should be able to get out of the depression. And how do you do that? You cannot escape. You cannot escape facts of impermanence, of old age, of failures, of disappointment, etc., etc. But you can transcend them. You can transcend them. And to transcend them, transcending means coming to a higher level. It doesn't mean escaping from the problems at a given level. When you come to a higher level and look down, you still see the problems are there, but they don't disturb you so much now. They come and they go. And that's because you now have a higher aspiration, a higher ideal. So in the case of the Buddha, the ideal is to seek permanent peace, inner peace and harmony in man. And in this way, you transcend the lower level to come to a higher level. Yeah, at which problems at higher levels, though they are there, they're no more bother us very much now. So this is the case of Buddha. He didn't become the Buddha immediately, but he was inspired. That's a word that I want to talk about, and in my lecture tomorrow I'm going to emphasize that aspect much more. So he decided that's it, and on that very night itself, he fled the palace, as the story goes, and he became a monk, yeah, and a mendicant, yeah, and eventually he was enlightened. Today we have the Dharma. Thanks for that. So thanks to the Buddha's, you can say in a way, experience of depression, experience of existential anguish, maybe is a better term. And finally, he gains perfect harmony and integration, symbolized by the term Vidyācaraṇa, means Xing-Ju. That is to say, he achieves the state of the highest potential of a human being. Yeah, he is human perfected. Like Venerable Taishu has emphasized, 人成即佛成. When man is perfected, he becomes Buddha. That's what Buddhahood means. So, at that level, he is fully harmonized. And he doesn't experience the kind of conflict and clash that we all have in different forms, to different degrees of the clash between reason on the one hand and emotion on the other. Yeah? And so on. What he knows, knowing, in the sense of wisdom, right? What he knows truly, he spontaneously expresses it in terms of body, speech, and mind. So that is his being, that is charana. Vidya is his knowing. So in his case, knowing and being are one. Yeah, this is a far cry from the case of what is called an ordinary being, a Buddha-Jana, one who has not achieved any spiritual attainment, Fanfu in Chinese. And in fact, the Buddha later on declares that all ordinary worldlings, Fanfu, are actually mad. That's true. Don't be scared of madness. Don't be frightened of being split. We all split. We have to accept that fact. When you import all these Western ideas and Western problems, and you become overwhelmed, you don't know how to handle them. But we have a frame of reference to handle them. That is the Dharma. We are clear about the different levels of human experiences. We are clear about the path to transcend the human predicament, transcendence that I've just talked about. So the Buddha then says that, teaches that all ordinary beings are actually mad. The word is ummattaka. Unmattaka in Sanskrit, and you know that in for example in Chinese Buddhism, in the Heart Sutra, you have Tian Dao Meng Xiang. You're in Tian Dao. Tian Dao. Imagine that, upside down. Yeah? We think we are so sane. From the point of view of enlightenment, we're all mad. Okay? Let's accept it. We're all split. And if you are split, you should not be scared of it. You must find a way to transcend it. You must find a way to come to a higher level when all your fragmented selves become unified, integrated. And that's a Buddhist ideal. Yeah? That's symbolized by the term Vidyācaraṇa. Talking about the split, the conflict between reason and emotion, between, I say, knowing and being. In the case of Buddha, his being is a spontaneous expression of his knowing. That is to say, he doesn't have to tell himself, oh, I can't kill. It's bad to do like this. I should not do like that. All his compassions and love and kindness are spontaneous expression of his inner wisdom. That's Vidyācaraṇa Sambandha. He simply can't hate anybody. He simply can't intend to harm anybody. And he cannot help wanting to be kind to all beings, because after all, he experiences no self. The suffering of the so-called others are in fact his very suffering himself. So he has no clash between reason and emotion. He may have physical ailment. We know they were seen in the sutras. He feels tired and he had stomach ache and he had to pass away. He was sick. Once he was very sick, and he asked Mahachunta, to expound, to clarify the teaching of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And Mahachunta followed his instruction and expounded on it, and it is said that as a result, the Buddha recovered from that serious sickness. That's very interesting. I had much can be said about that, but today we don't have time. What it means when I believe that we can learn a lot from the life of Buddha. Do not think that life of Buddha is only for the kindergarten Buddhist. We have to learn more every day. When I look at the life of Buddha and contemplate on what I see in the sutras and the Vinayas about the Buddha, every time I discover something new and learn something to relate to my own life. So that's the case of the Buddha. As to this clash that I've described, let me cite an example outside Buddhism, and there's an important saying called St. Paul. You know that, right? It's extremely important for the teaching of Christ, of Christianity. Now St. Paul has this to say, as a saint, remember, as a saint, he says, now I've just chosen one translations. There are many different versions. What he says basically like this: I do not understand what I do. I do not understand my action. He confesses that he doesn't understand. That's interesting as a saint. And he feels that he's not endowed with proper understanding. He doesn't have vidya, like in Buddhist terms. Why? For what I want to do, I do not. But what I hate, I do. What he wants to do, he failed to do. What he knows, at his level of knowing, to be negative, even to be destructive, he can't help doing. And this is our tragedy. We all are like this. We are not any better than St. Paul, just in different forms and to different degrees. And this comes out from the mouth of a great saint. And that's extremely interesting. That sums up, human nature. Even a human who is so much devoted to spiritual striving, so sincere. St. Paul must have had his great spiritual attainments, yet he had to face this conflict between knowing and being. Buddhism offers a path to transcend it, as I said. Hence the unique significance of Buddhism. Another story, maybe Now, I think more familiar to you, and that's a story in the Tang Dynasty, relating to a great poet called Bai Juyi. I think some of you, I'm sure, know about him, right? Great poet. And he prized himself in his understanding of Buddhism, Buddhist doctrines, and he believes that he's a great practitioner, yeah. And he looks for great teachers, profound teachings, yeah, and profound Dharma discussions. So he has heard about one Chan master. I think the word Zen is more familiar to you, meditation master. And this master is a very interesting one. This master lives in a kind of a hut built on the top of a tree. Yeah, that is like a bird nest. I call him a bird nest Chan master. Yeah, and so he heard about this master's reputation, and he went to either to sincerely want to seek spiritual teaching from him, or to challenge him and to show, to show off his understanding himself and his attainment. So he asked the question, what is Tao? Of course, Tao can connote several things, and basically it means something spiritual, the spiritual life, spiritual praxis, or even enlightenment. So what is Tao? And the master answers like that. The answer is very simple, and I'm sure you can recite that also. Doing no evil, doing all good, and this is a spiritual practice. This is Tao. You know the Chinese? 诸恶莫作，众善奉行，知行其义，是诸佛教。So the first two parts of the whole statement, doing no evil, doing all good, this is Tao. Then Bai Juyi was disappointed. I have come to seek profound teaching, thinking that, as described by others, you are master of great spiritual attainment and spiritual wisdom. I want something more profound, because what you have told me, I'm paraphrasing a bit, is a kind of insult to me, because I'm sure even a 3-year-old child knows it. I don't need to be told by you. I've come for something very profound. Well, the master answers in an extremely inspiring and interesting way. He says that, yes, so even a 3-year-old can say these words. It's true. I'm sorry, a lot of typos, yeah? These words. But even an old man of 80 years cannot practice it. What one knows, yeah, is not necessarily what one can practice, like St. Paul exclaims. There are many teachings in Buddhism that seem very simple. Well, many truths, profoundest truths, expressed in very simple terms, are the most difficult to practice. So practice is one thing, understanding, knowing, studying is another thing. And this is a good illustration of the human existential predicament. That is, man, I say man, I mean human, man's clash, conflict between reason and emotion. And that's why we don't succeed. Otherwise, people like to say everything is kong, is empty. They think they know so well. If you try to explain something, say from the early suttas, oh yeah, these are just intellectual things, simple teachings, but everything is kong. Don't be attached to even the Dhamma, the Buddha. These are, in Chinese we call mouth chan, koto chan, mouth zen. Yeah? 烦恼是菩提 烦恼是菩提 enlightenment is defilements. Do you mean that just because of that statement you can just indulge in all the defilements? Yeah? Do you mean that you are enlightened just because you are doing all the evils? Unfortunately today in the Buddhist movement, I think in many places people indulge in this kind of mouth sense, mouth chants. Yeah? And I remember when I was a young monk, I was in the West, and some smart, clever Western Buddhists questioned me. Why do you call yourself a monk? Why do you wear the robe? Why do you need a Buddhist name? Aren't all these things labels? Aren't they attachment? It's true, they are attachment, they are labels. But I tell them, we need all these labels. We need all these names. We need traditions until and unless we can transcend them. If you talk like a Buddha and kid yourself and delude yourself that you're Buddha, then you would think that yes, I don't need Buddhism, I don't need the Buddha, I don't need to call myself a Buddhist. But for us, everything matters. The name is an inspiration. That's why I encourage Buddhists to use Buddhist name. Why do we have to be so conditioned by this Western way of thinking and doing things? And everybody I think even in Singapore, most people, and not everybody, fortunately not everybody, and some of the people, my grade students are not like that. I'm so happy. But most people like to have a Christian name. And in Hong Kong also, everybody has a Christian name. It becomes automatic. But there is a psychological effect. The way you call yourself and others, the way you dress as a Westerner, etc., etc. All these have very profound impact on you in ways that you don't even become aware. So, the two examples I give you make it very clear that to be a good Buddhist, a sincere Buddhist, right? Of course you must practice Buddhism, and this practice is not to be equated with just verbal, intellectual and ideas and understanding. So I always say that for me, in my case, I'm first and foremost a humble Buddhist. I fail in many ways and I have a lot of weaknesses, but I have my sincerity, I have my faith, I have my commitment, I have my goal as a Buddhist. I fall almost every day and I can get up and I can walk forwards. Yeah? So I often say that I'm first and foremost a Buddhist, and then secondarily you can call me a professor or whatever. Okay. So this is the human situation, and it also spells out the Buddhist ideal of the integration of Vidyācaraṇa, of understanding and being, of knowing and being. This ideal of integration and perfect harmony, in fact, is the Buddhist ideal, the Buddha's ideal. I have not invented it. I have not innovated it. Yeah? And let me give you just a simple illustration. A stanza that you are familiar with in the Chinese, you can see here. Yeah? And this is the Pali here. I'm not going to spend time on this, but I have to highlight a few things. This stanza says that all conditioning forces, sankhara, xing, conditioning forces, all phenomena, are impermanent, and they are of the nature of arising and ceasing. Arising and ceasing signifies commotion. signifies dukkha, signifies disharmony, signifies conflict, signifies disappointment. You don't get what you want, you don't possess something permanently, you become depressed. What you have, you lose. Whether it's a friend, someone whom you love, or whether it's a money or reputation, you become depressed. Yeah? This is the situation. This is called dukkha. The word dukkha, ku, does not just mean suffering. Yeah? Basically, I translate this as unsatisfactoriness. From the point of view of perfect harmony, all that happens in human existence are unsatisfactory. Hence dukkha, hence ku. Yeah? Upachitva nirachanti means having a reason, they cease. This is important. The next line is very important. Te sam vupasamo sukho. I'm sorry, this again a lot typo there. Yeah. Should not be a double K there. So this vupasamo represents, this is happy. Sukho is an adjective, happy. Is peaceful, is happy. What is that? Vupasamo. Appeasement. Appeasement is harmony. Is freedom from conflicts. It's security in the highest sense. There's a word for it in Buddhism, we call it yoga shema. Anwen. The term in Chinese sometimes occurs like anyun. That should be anwen. So this stanza sums up the ideal of Buddhism, which says that we all experience what I call commotion, what I call dukkha, what I call unsatisfactoriness, what I call split, conflict. And the ideal is the appeasement of this conflict, this commotion. And this is harmony, this is integration. Often, I'm sure you know this stanza very well. In places like Sri Lanka, you chant it every time you go to a funeral. But when we become, this is what I mean by studying Buddhism and practicing Buddhism. In the very study itself, it should be a practice. When you read this, you read it with sincerity, with mindfulness, meditatively. You are practicing. You're not just reading, you're just understanding intellectually. Preparing for an exam, getting a degree. You really feel existentially anguish, and you really feel that yes, there's a way out. That is upasamo. That is appeasement, harmony. And not only that, you don't just know, you don't just become convinced that, inspired that there is this goal. Human can overcome their predicament, like the Buddha when he saw the last sight, the recluse. You also have, we must be grateful to the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Dharma, Fofa, as the frame of orientation. You have your goal, you orientate towards your goal. When you go astray, when you slip, when you fall down, you know how to get up, where to go forwards. That's all you want. I don't think you are so foolish as in the case of some people to think that having taken the 3 refuges or becoming a monk or becoming a Buddhist, you become perfect. We are not saints. Saint Paul as a saint exclaims in the manner I've told you. He feels so sincerely about the human predicament of clash and conflict and split. But what is important is your sincerity, your commitment, your moral shamefulness, 惭愧. So you have the whole idea here. Here this briefly, this stanza sums up what is dukkha and transcendental dukkha, that is sukha. And it also illustrates the point, clarifies a misunderstanding, common misunderstanding that Buddhism is pessimistic. In fact, Buddhism is a path of happiness, a path of transcendence. You gain higher and higher level of happiness when you become more and more integrated. And your happiness, you can sleep, you can fall down, you can again become depressed, but you get up again. The next time you get up, you may come to a higher level. You experience a highest sense of harmony and satisfaction as a human being. I'm truly a human, for example. You feel like that. And then again, you may fall down. Yeah? Okay, going back then to the answer by the bird nest master, Vidyācaraṇa, which is the common statement, right? That you can find, for instance, in all Buddhist traditions, in the Pali, in the Chinese, in the Agamas, in the Mahayana and Aniyana. That is, looks very simple. Do no evil, do all good. Of course, in the original Pali stanza, you have the purification of one's mind. That's a very important part. Vidyācaraṇa did not bring out that last part, but his concern is to show that a teaching like be good, don't be evil. In other words, do all good, do no evil, can be a very simple idea, concept, but it's the most difficult to practice. And one important aspect hinges on your own, as I said, sincerity and so on, but also on the path provided. Buddhism provides a path. You look at the framework of the Four Noble Truths. You have the statement of dukkha, and then the samudaya, the cause of dukkha, and then the statement that yes, dukkha can be transcended as the truth of happiness, the third one. And the fourth one, it goes further. In the fourth one, it actually tells you the actual concrete path to transcend it. It's not just telling you, everybody can overcome depression, full stop. That wouldn't help you. There must be a path. That path is the Dhamma. Dharma, right? So, this is what is meant by purification of mind. Again, we have to understand what is meant by purification, what is being pure. People have all kinds of ideas. To be pure means you don't read pornography, and you don't watch that kind of movies, then you are pure, And if you can suppress your sensual desire, then you are pure. It's not like that. Or if you are not, then you are not pure. Yeah. Think of, for instance, the ideal of the absolute pure mind in Yogacara. What they're talking about is not this kind of what you might call moral purity, in that kind of in a shallow sense. It means the complete transcendence of the dualistic working of the mind. And it means a state of, again, in our context, integration and harmonization. Your mind is completely harmonized, appeased, integrated. You are pure in the true and highest sense. And Yogacara asserts that, in fact, is an innate potential for all beings. Buddhism says, after all, that Buddhahood is innate in all of us. That's the true meaning of purification. People are very obsessed with that kind of legalistic, almost puritanic way of understanding, for instance, precepts. And so I have something to say on that also this time. Very soon. So that part is very important. the mind to be purified, in the sense that I have explained, surely it requires a path. Surely it means that you have to transform. You can't just know, oh yeah, I have to be harmonized. Knowing, even your will is better than just intellectual knowing yet. But all these are not enough. You have to enter the process of transformation, and that's where meditation comes in. That's why I go so far as to say that we can't claim to be Buddhist unless we do some meditation. Why do I say that? First of all, look at the Buddhist path. It's Shila, Samadhi, Prajna. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Yeah? 就是戒, Ding, Hui in Chinese. And Samadhi, you can see that is an integral part, to say the least, of the whole Buddhist frame of reference that I've been talking about. Yeah? And Sila is for is an instrument for Samadhi. And Samadhi is the necessary, is a sine qua non for the unfoldment of Prajna. And Prajna is the goal, because Prajna liberates you from the conflicts, brings you to integration. So it has to go to Samadhi. By the way, I forgot to add, when I was talking about the human goal, the existence, the goal of human existence, right? And the frame reference, right? I wanted to go on to quote Professor Erich Fromm, a great modern thinker who inspired me in my younger days a lot, even nowadays too. And of course, he was a great professor of psychology and psychotherapy. Yeah, and he defines Buddhism, religion as a framework, a frame of orientations with a specific goal of devotion. You have a goal to devote to. You know the meaning of a life. Why do I exist as a human being? What does it mean to exist? To live, to be alive. And he says to be alive is to unfold your human potential. When you're unfolding it, you are being alive. Yeah? So for him, religion, admittedly a difficult term to define, and again we cannot be conditioned by the Western way of definition and explanations, right? For him, is a frame of reference with an object of devotion. So that very broad way of definition, right, can be applied to all people. Whether you are a scientist, whether you're a logician, you're so logical, you are pursuing some meaning. You believe that, for instance, logic or scientific method solves your ultimate problems. That's why you sacrifice your life in the lab day and night. Sometimes even your marriage life. What for? For the purpose. For the purpose of existence. And you have found a frame of reference. For instance, it may be science, it may be anything. So that's what he means by religion. And it's very interesting. From picks up the example of the Buddha, of the four sights. I think I've talked about it in some other context. Yeah? To illustrate what he means by a psychological type called the productive psychological type. He defines human psychological types. Like, for instance, a simple one is the type of what do you call that? Commercial orientation, marketing orientation. Sorry, that's the term. You know what I mean? This is especially relevant today in our societies, especially Asian society influenced, conditioned by Western way of thinking. We look at others as a commercial product. Can I get some profit out of that person? If so, that person is good. I want to have a relationship with that person. If not, I will ignore. I would even dislike that person. People think of marketing, packaging a product to suit the demand of the market. Of course, in business, I don't know about this business, so I can't really unfairly, whitewash and with this kind of remarks. But I do want to say that this is what I see in Asian Buddhists. They learn automatically from the Western way of thinking. How did they learn it? Even if they have not been to a Western country, they have been colonized for many years. Yeah, the textbook, the school system, you go through the English medium in which you are educated, all this, they are conditioning your mind. So in some Asian societies, right, which has gone through the process of colonization, they are very business conscious. You can't really have a truly human relationship with them, with this kind of people. But fortunately, I have the good Buddhists around me, everywhere, whether it's Hong Kong or China or Malaysia, Singapore. I'm grateful to them. And generally they are not quite like that. But if you look at the society at large, you do see this. They are very tense, and the tension is about money, is about profit, and so on. By the way, I cannot help remembering one example. This is in Singapore. I don't name the person or the place. Once, in my younger days, that was the time when I started editing the Journal of Buddhist Studies, and I was a very poor monk. Now, not much improved, but at that time, more so in Sri Lanka, and we started a journal, and the professors were all supportive and share my idea, and they joined, the great professors, and you saw their names there. But they are also not well-to-do, and then they are busy with other things, and finally, to cut the story short, I find myself doing everything. And even looking for money and going to the press and typing things, learning the pagemaker. I think Dr. Lee has helped me to proofread and edit things like this. I had to do all these things myself, So once I came to Singapore, like for instance, these kind of places, and the Buddhists are very kind. They say, Shifu, why don't we go to that particular big monastery? I don't name it. Very rich, and they have a big fund for publications. And I'm sure you can get some sponsorship there. So I believed them. They took me there. Then I met a young man who was supposed to be the chairman of the committee, and he was speaking to me quite sternly. He was much younger than I, a layman, And I'm afraid I'm not perfect, and I was reacting in my heart. And then when the devotee who brought me there explained the cause and my need, that man said, we look at the market, We before we give a response, we look at the market. I got very annoyed, and I told him, you mean that this is the way if the market wants books on magics, and then you sponsor all books on magical mantra and all these things, and if someone explains about the human problems, and you're not interested, because these kind of books would not have good market. Then I told him, if the Dhamma has no market now, it is time to create the market. He got a bit shocked, I think, and I was not interested in getting any fund from. But eventually, I think he thought about it, and then a news was passed on to me that they decided to donate $1,000. I still remember that. I'm very grateful. So it's this kind of personality called marketing personality. From was very insightful, Professor From. And talking about another type, so he listed something like five types of personalities, and one type is a positive one, that is called the productive orientation. And he singles out the Buddha. Very interesting. And he relates the story of the last sight. The Buddha experiences that in the occasion, the fact of human impermanence, and he experiences also the possibility, he perceives the possibility of transcending it, and he is inspired, he is motivated, and he becomes productive because he actually make the actual step of transcending it, and he finds a solution, at least according to the Buddhist tradition. And this is a good example of what he calls productive orientation. Okay, coming back to this idea of samadhi, you can see, as I said, even in that basic structure of the path, sila, samadhi, prajna, you can't ignore samadhi. Now, I want to say a few words about samadhi also. Usually in English, it translates as concentration. I do not like that translation. In my class, I told my students, I'm not saying that it's wrong. Samadhi does have that connotation. But we look at the word, and also not just the word, not just from the philological point of view, but from the point of view of the spiritual context, that samadhi is much, much more than just what we ordinary, at least in the modern world, understand as concentration. Some are da. Da is to place, is to hold. A means completely. Some also mean perfectly. So the mind is held perfectly in harmony. Unperturbed. Think of Xuanzang translation. The Chinese translation, 定. 还有, there's one more. Do you know? 等持. That's a beautiful translation. 等 means evenly. That corresponds to some and a. 持 is to hold, da. So like a balance, you hold the balance properly, and it doesn't tip in one particular direction. This is harmony. This is the goal of Buddhism. And this samadhi, then, in the sense that I've described, illustrates the goal of integration, right, advocated by Buddhism. And you will look at, for instance, the Noble Eightfold Path. I have here. Now, what is the Noble Eightfold Path? You have, again, I don't like the translation, right understanding. It's not a question of right as opposed to wrong. And understanding is not wrong, but it's a little bit limited, because that understanding can, as I said, panya or prajna, yes, at the ordinary level it does mean understanding. In fact, the understanding can, according to Sarvastivada and Yogacara, can even be false. It can be right, can be false, can be wholesome, unwholesome, and so on, right? But it means, again, much more than that. At the highest level, it is wisdom. So maybe vision is a better translation. I would translate it proper vision. So proper motivation, proper speech. I don't want to spend too much time on things that you know so well. Proper action, proper livelihood, proper effort, proper mindfulness, proper integration. This is the one I want to come to. Samadhi. Ordinary, you see, right understanding and so on and so on. Finally, right what? Concentration. To say the least, it is very unsatisfactory, even misleading. Do you mean that you devote your whole life as a Buddhist only to arrive at some concentration? Even the right one? Of course, then you have to philosophize on what you mean by concentration. Then it might be okay. But certainly, the word concentration doesn't do justice to the ideal, which is the culmination of the last one. Culmination. That is samadhi. So I translate samadhi usually as either integration or unification, and also in the context of, for instance, meditation and Abhidharma, I use the word equipoise. I'm not the first one to use that word, but I think I'm one of those who consistently use that term, equipoise, 等持 and 定, stability. You can't have stability when your mind is disturbed. Your mind is disturbed when you have conflict, when you are in disharmony. Yeah. So samadhi actually very well illustrates what I'm trying to say as the ideal of integration resulting in Vidyācaraṇa sampatti. As to Shila, since I talk about Shila, Samadhi, Prajna, I can't resist quoting one example. This is Mahayana now. My approach is non-sectarian. It doesn't matter if you want to call me Hinayanis or whatever. It's fine, But I think I'm more interested. I'm interested in directly discerning the Buddha. Yeah. Of course, it doesn't mean, I have said many times, that we should disregard or belittle our tradition. We should profoundly respect our own tradition, love our tradition, but to authenticate, to consolidate our traditions, to verify our traditions, right? On the basis of the true Dharma that we discern, honestly, sincerely discern in the Buddha, in his teaching and his life example. Yeah. So, alright. So from this point of view, I like to quote one statement, one very interesting sutra statement, and this happens to be a very, very early Mahayana sutra. Yeah. Let us look at the Chinese first. I have translated it. There are two Chinese versions. One says, this text is called Druma Kinara Raja Paripricha. Paripricha is question. You can see the Chinese word term here, 所问经. Usually you go to the kitchen and you see that the Buddhist worship, but it plays important role in the doctrinal positions of the Buddha's teaching, and these kind of bodhisattva or divine beings are divine musicians. That's very interesting. That shows the aspect of creativity. I used it as an example to show the emphasis on the creative approach of Buddhism. It's not just textual study, not just logical thinking, not just rationality. Your heart must be touched. Music is about your feeling, your heart. Poetry too, yeah, and so on. So, this is a very interesting sutra because in this sutra, there are two groups of bodhisattvas, right? One group of bodhisattvas sing literally in songs, sings out the profound question, Dharma questions, right? Of course, clearly said to be inspired by the Buddha himself. Yeah, the Buddha is according to this sutra, is manifesting his teaching and wisdom through these musician deities. Then the other group of bodhisattva sings the answer, the profound answer to the profound questions. It's beautiful. Yeah. So anyway, to cut the story short, this is about the bodhicitta. You know what the bodhicitta is, right? Putishin. It is the aspiration for universal enlightenment. Yeah, it's not unlike indicated by the term bodhicitta. It's not just a thought in the sense of intellectual thought. Yeah, it's your existential commitment, involvement, right, in the ideal of universal enlightenment, enlightening yourself and others. Okay, it says, look at the Chinese, 其有三心边有境界, right? One who has a mind of goodness, right, has the pure shilas. So shila is not a matter of following this rule, that rules, five precepts, this 10 precepts, and so on, And the people say, what can I do? What shall I do if I break a precept? I'm offending the Bodhisattva, offending the Buddha. How will I be punished? And that kind of mentality is very Christian. And again, this is an example of that kind of conditioning I'm talking about from Western culture. I'm saying like this, but don't mistake me for being anti-West. I think I learned a lot from the Western culture, so I'm benefited from them, and they have very profound aspects. But I'm blaming our own Asians. We should look at the positive aspect of their culture, but we learn all these peripheral, all these formalistic aspects, bureaucratic aspects of their system. They themselves are going, kind of putting behind all these bureaucratic approaches. Anyway, so precept doesn't mean rules of doing this and doing that and so on. Usually, a precept is 戒条. But that's only one aspect of it. They are recommendations. They are not commandments from the Buddha or by the Bodhisattvas or by the tradition. You are recommended to live a certain way of life because this way of life, right, aligns you with holiness, helps you to tune into holiness, sacredness, perfection, harmony. Yeah? And then eventually you too become harmonized, perfected. So your expression through body, speech and mind are not just rules to be obeyed, but your behavior, that is an expression of your inclination towards the good, the beautiful, the true. I often say in Chinese we have a phrase called 见贤思齐. You understand what I mean? You see a virtuous person, you feel like you want to be like that person. You emulate. So this is what sila is. And in that sense, sila is also seen in our devotion. When you worship the Buddha, it's not a question of bowing down to an idol. Not obedient because my community, my culture wants me to bow down to the Buddha. You feel that you simply can't help wanting to bow down, wuti toti, when you see the Buddha, because you are inspired by the Buddha. You see all the sacredness, holiness. You want to align with it. This alignment is sila. By the word sila in Pali and Sanskrit, what is the basic meaning? The basic meaning actually means nature. You want to acquire that nature. You want to tune to that nature. You want to align with the nature. So that is sila. So here it says, so sila, first thing, involves the heart. All these aspects, your emotions, your feelings, your cognitive aspect. It's like, I often give the example of a mother, of the only child. She doesn't have to be told and commanded, you must look after your child, protect your child like that. She cannot help wanting to protect her child. She knows what to do. Given her desire, utmost desire to protect and to help the child, she knows what's best for the child. She doesn't have to be told. So her behavior is sila, in that sense. So it says here that when we have a mind of goodness, this is the mind from the heart, then you have Sila, you have pure Sila. It's not when you can succeed in following this rule 10%, 20%, 100%, externally. All Shilas to be significant as Buddhist Sila must be externalized from within. Yeah? And the other one is more interesting, 戒是菩提心. Sila is the bodhicitta. And this is reflected in the, Tibetan, you can see that Changchuk Sem Ki, Chokim Te. Right? Changchuk Sem is your bodhicitta. Chokim is the Sila. There is endowed with, possesses. The key is instrumental case, means through or on account of Changchuk Sem, on account of the bodhicitta, you are endowed with Sila. This is just like these two Chinese. Yeah? So why do we want to be a moral person? Not because the world expects respectable people to be moral. Yeah? And people when they talk about Buddhism, or they admire Buddhism because Buddhism has so many moral rules. It has high moral stand. Of course, these are beautiful aspects, but they miss the point. You see? And people compare Buddhism with other religions. Every religion tells you to do good. Of course, it's true. But if Buddhism offers nothing more than that, then I wouldn't go for Buddhism. Yeah? So, Sila, Samadhi, Prajna at the highest level are one also. So, Vidyācaraṇa is a harmonization between your Sila on the one hand, that is your external behaviors, right? And Prajna on the other, through or on the basis of Samadhi. A Samadhi represents the ideal of integrating your Sila and your Prajna. So in the case of Buddha, his Prajna is Vidya, and his his Charana is his Sila. So I think today we have to understand afresh what we read in the Buddhist tradition, the text. And the only true criteria, reliable criteria, is the Buddha himself. So we have to continuously learn to discern the Buddha. And then we can then look at his teachings. I have been teaching Buddhism for, as you know, so many years. I've been writing. But each time when I have to teach something that I've read many times before, every time I pause and think, I gain something new. This is what I tell my students. And this is how you make 学佛, 佛学, 佛学, 学佛. In the very midst of studying Buddhism, lecturing, writing, thinking about Buddhism, if your heart, your whole being is involved, emotions are involved, your faith are involved, then you are practicing it. You are transforming yourself. Yeah, it comes back to why we need samadhi. Why do we need meditation? Because it is through meditation that we can be transformed. You can't transform yourself just through intellectual understanding. Just like the modern psychotherapists would tell the patients that to really change, to really overcome your, say, depression or your problems, you have to yourself gain insight into the situation. Without the insight, you won't change it. It doesn't matter how much the therapists, the books tell you, how much you understand intellectually. It's the insight that matters. Once you have understood it, you can kind of extend it, right, to the case of Buddhism. This insight is more than, I believe, more than what the psychotherapist can guide you. I think any form of modern Western psychotherapies, yeah, because it's an insight that arises from the deep level that takes place in meditation. You can only transform yourself at the very depth of your being and through meditation. And that's where religion comes in. So that's why we need religion. So Fromm said that the need of religion is rooted in man's existence. That's quite true. So that's the importance of samadhi. That's the importance of integration in that sense, in the sense of transforming yourself. Of course, transforming yourself through the Dharma. And Dharma is not to be abstracted, not to be understood in the merely intellectual sense. So what we have read just now from the Tibetan, from the Chinese, and from my English translation, I give translation like that, on account of bodhicitta. So the same key. Because of that, one becomes endowed with the Sila. It's the heart. If the mother wants to love and protect the child, she knows what to do best. She doesn't have to be commanded, demanded. So you can say that in Buddhist ethical training, talking about Sila, you see, and for that matter, all other training, it is spiritually significant and conducive to attainment of enlightenment, wisdom. That's the goal of Buddhism. Only if the heart is involved. Only if it is based on compassion and aspiration for bodhi. This in this context. So when you come to, for instance, Abhidharma in the Mahavibhasha, there's a profound statement which says that what is Vinaya? You think again Vinaya means so many rules, 250, 227 or 500 for the bhikshunis, and that's what usually people understand as Vinaya. Or this ritualistic system, this another one, and so on. You see, not this system, not these rules. Vinaya is the emanation of great compassion. How interesting! Vinaya represents the external, expressions through body, speech, and mind. But it says that it's the emanation of great compassion. Emanation means it flows out, teng liu, nishanta. It flows out compassion. This is much like what we have read just now in the Tibetan and the Chinese. And in another place it says that great compassion, what is intrinsic nature? They study, the Abhidharma studies intrinsic nature of things. You might think that it's just too scholastic. There is a scholastic aspect of it, no doubt about that, but you can see that the ultimate concern is a spiritual one. So in this case, talking about the intrinsic nature, that means the thing in the self called compassion, what is it? It is wisdom. So the two are not divorced. Cannot be divorced. Without wisdom, you don't have compassion. Without compassion, you cannot perfect your wisdom. Or we can say that no true transformation, I'm talking about transformation. Vidyācaraṇa is the ideal of transforming yourself into a complete harmonized, integrated being, free from conflict. That itself is a beautiful inspiration, beautiful ideal to pursue. Of course, ideal is always ideal, and you can't realize the ideal to the fullest so easily. But it's the ideal that motivates you, that pushes you along in your struggle as a human being, right? Trapped in samsaric unsatisfactoriness, in conflict and clashes, in depression and so on. So it's possible unless emotion and evolution are also deeply involved. That's what's meant by the heart. That's what's meant by bodhicitta. That's what is meant by we are capable of doing it. But first we must have awareness of it. We must be humble enough to know that we lag behind. Yeah? And look at the West. And I've said many times, I don't know how many of you have heard about my talk in Mandarin about Xuanzang, directed. I have emphasized that point. You see, we look at, for instance, in modern history, the translation of important Buddhist scriptures, whether it's Theravada or Mahayana. You look at the Dhammapada, it was not translated by Buddhists, less still by Asian Buddhist, less still by Asian bhikkhu or bhikkhuni. Yeah, the first translation was in Latin, by Westerner. And then all the great translation by, the Rhys Davids and the Polytech Society, all these are Western scholars. And slowly, of course, you have a few, the Burmese and others joining in Sri Lankan, but they are actually a minority. And we look at the case of Mahayana Sutra. You know that all the important Mahayana Sutra at the beginning were not translated by any Buddhist. Less still by Buddhist monk, bhikshus or bhikshuni. No. I look at, for instance, they are translated by whom? By not only Westerner, but Western Catholic fathers. Western Catholic fathers. We should feel ashamed. They were great scholars. They were great Western scholars. I always admired them, and we always feel grateful to them. People like Levi, the Belgian tradition, the French tradition, people like his disciple de la Vallée-Poussin, like Lamotte, and all these people. They translated, for instance, Mahayana Sangraha, the Abhidharmakosa Bhashya, and Xuanzang Chengwei Shi Lun. All these were done by Western Catholic fathers. Can't we catch up? Shouldn't we catch up? Yeah. But another thing that I admire about these examples is that as far as I know, they were very sincere and profound practitioners themselves in their religions. Maybe some of them have become Buddhists in the heart. But the way when you read their reading, you feel that they're writing with a lot of feeling from within. They're not just analyzing as an academician. There are academicians like that, and sometimes there can be very nasty ones. Like Keith is one example. He sees nothing great about Buddhism, although he studies Buddhism and Indologies and so on, but he wants to always catch a chance to belittle, to criticize. There's nothing profound, nothing deep, nothing great. And then there are examples of Christian missionaries who worked in China. For instance, the person who translated Timothy Richard, who translated the Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana, Tatsang Qi Xing Lun. Today it's available online. You can look at it. Horrible distortion, of the profound Mahayana teachings. And basically what he wants to say is that whatever is profound, this text he say very, very profound, right? And whatever that is profound there are all Christian teachings. Yeah, the Tathagata is translated as the Messiah, and Zhenru. You know how he translates Zhenru? Who can remember? Zhenru is Bhutata, or there are many other terms. Reality. He translates that as the true model. Capital T, capital M. Do you get what I mean? God creates man in his own image. That is ultimate reality in Buddhism. That's Zhenru. That's how he understands. That's how he distorts the message of Mahayana Sangraha. Yeah, it's so unfortunate. And he claims that he gained the support of the Shanghai Buddhist leaders, because these people didn't understand what he was doing, and didn't understand English enough. And so they were so happy that a foreigner, a missionary, wants to learn and translate their scriptures. These men exploited the Buddhists, abused their kindness. So today we have to uplift our own standard, and we have to vow to expound the profound teachings of the Buddhist traditions, the Buddhist scriptures, and to translate them. Even if we don't have time to produce a whole text translation, we translate the important materials like these great people like Hussein and others have done. But at the same time, we also see, as I said, these great examples, the few Catholic fathers I've just mentioned, they see the greatness that they remain steadfast as spiritually committed practitioners. We should be like that. We should feel like this, and that's why I promote the idea of Vidyācaraṇa. Okay, I think I have spent too much time now, so I'll come to a conclusion now. Okay, we'll do a simple one. I think it's best to do it in Chinese.
Yes.
愿以此功德
愿以此功德
普及一切
普及一切
我等与众生
我等与众生
皆共成佛道。
皆共成佛道。Shall we rise to give three bows to
Just
Bhante?
one bow is
Okay.
enough.
Okay. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you for attending the talk.
No, is there
No kidding. No kidding.
If you really have a question to ask that's relevant, then you can do so. But don't digress from the content of my talk. Yeah? Yeah?
Whether in Buddhism, Dhamma, Christianity, God's will, Taoism, Tao, Confucianism, 天人合一. In the modern times, there are now 8 billion people. Not a single person is able to reverse samsara. What do you think? We have to wait for Maitreya to come, then we can reverse samsara?
I don't understand connection of your first part with the second part. You're talking about all these different religious systems, and then suddenly you're asking me the question whether we should wait for Maitreya to come. I don't see the connection, yeah?
To Buddha, other religions, whether it's other religions, they teach about good, is the same like...
I think I have answered the question in my talk. I wouldn't say, for me, I can't say on behalf of other religions that they teach the same thing of goodness, right? I wouldn't give this kind of pseudo identification. This in Buddhism equals that in Christianity and so on. All religions teach you to be good. Is it true? What's meant by good? So they are different. They should be understood in their own context. Yeah. Talking about Maitreya though, let me tell you, whether we should wait. I say no, sorry. We should not wait. Start where you are now. Create the conditions for the rebirth of Maitreya, the next Buddha. But this creation of condition must start now. It's not a question of waiting. Yeah.
Hi Bhante, thank you for your talk just now. I actually have a few questions. Let me. Just now, okay, you were saying Samma Samadhi. You were translating it as proper integration. So, from what my understanding, I don't know if it's grounded in the suttas or not, that Samma Samadhi is usually defined as at least first jhana. So, does that?
Not first jhana. It's the 4 jhanas.
Is
the 4, the dhyanas.
The 4th jhana.
The 4.
Yeah, and so minimum.
Not the first.
Minimum first jhana.
I don't know whether you can talk about minimum.
As in first, second, third, fourth. So as long as you get your at least first jhana, then it is considered as Samma Samadhi.
Yeah. So, what is your problem?
No. So, does that fulfill? Is that the same as your translation?
No. That shows that in jhana there is this aspect of integration. In fact, the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma explained very well. You see, dhyana itself signifies, right, the balancing, the harmonization between samatha and vipassana. 止观等运. Do you understand what I mean? Samatha, vipassana are 2 aspects of Buddhism.
I think I'm getting more questions.
Okay, samatha is 止.
I don't
you
understand.
Are because this is about jhana. This is about dhyana.
Yeah. No, but so wait. Does that mean that when
let me finish.
Jhana,
let me finish what I'm trying to tell you. Okay. So when Samma Samadhi or Samyak Samadhi explained as the dhyanas, the important point is that it's a state of integration.
Okay.
Yeah. Of the concentration aspect and the insight aspect. It's not just concentration. That's what I'm getting at.
Does that mean that when somebody reaches first jhana, then there is a concentration and wisdom aspect?
Yes. At the different levels, different degrees. In the case of the Buddha, is perfect. There's a lot more I can say, but talking about this concentration and insight, that emphasis also came a bit later. Yeah, in the commentary traditions. In the case of the Buddha, you see, meditation. You're talking about definition of Samma Samadhi. You are using commentary definitions, traditional explanations. Yeah, in the particular commentary tradition. Yeah, in the teaching of the Buddha that I understand, he does not make a black and white contrast between concentration on the one hand and then insight on the other. Today, of course, you go to any meditation movement, this is what they emphasize to you, and they say that you don't need that much of concentration. What you need is insight, and they start you after 1 hour of breathing in and out with concentration. So what I want to say, the Buddha always emphasizes the harmony and the balance of the mental state, and that is jhana or dhyana.
Okay. My next question is that just now you were mentioning that it was highlighted a few times that enlightenment is the integration of wisdom and compassion.
Yeah. What objection do you have?
I don't know. I'm generally from the Pali Theravada tradition, so I think is.
Well, I have told you that sometimes some expressions are not found in a particular tradition, like for instance Theravada or Pali text in exactly the same way as what you find in some other later traditions. It doesn't mean that this explanation, this emphasis, this kind of emphasis are not or are absent in the early traditions. You can see I've been trying to prove to you that in the Buddha's own example, in his own enlightenment and his own teaching, the Buddha is certainly an integration of with the word Vidyācaraṇa itself. The whole night I'm talking to you, represents the 2 aspects of, if you like, you see. Now your expressions, charana of course it just means your conduct, but it means much more than that also, than ordinary conduct. It means that your expression through body, speech and mind. And the important thing is that in the case of the Buddha, what is his bodily, vocal and mental expression in terms of behavior. It's one of compassion, isn't it? Can you deny that?
No,
Look at his whole life. It's a life of compassion.
I think my question was more of among the 4 Brahma Viharas, where does Metta and Upekkha stand? How come Karuna stands out?
There is so much I can have to tell you. Look, you have shifted to these 4 Viharas. Let me tell you one thing. Your Metta.
Because Karuna is one of the Viharas.
Yeah, Metta, Karuna. One of Vihara, but they go higher and higher, if you like, and or levels, or there are different dimensions of it. When you come to Upekkha, how do you translate Upekkha?
Equanimity.
You don't want to say indifference, right?
Okay.
You don't want to end up in a state when you are totally indifferent to everybody, to all your whole person, your own feelings. It's not like that. Upekkha represents actually harmony and integration that I talk about today. Yeah? And your mind is totally unperturbed, undisturbed. Whether you're talking about your Theravada tradition or whatever traditions, that's the meaning of Upekkha. It's actually equanimity. Yeah? Equanimity presupposes harmony and balance. You're not perturbed whether people accept you or not, like you or not, you know. People praise you or defame you, or whatever happens to you, your mind is completely harmonized and integrated. Isn't that the integration of vision and compassion? Can you ordinarily do it? You can't do it just from the intellectual aspect. No, just emotionally. Emotionally, we get caught all the time. But Upekkha represents a state where we don't get caught, where wisdom and compassion are fusing. But the most important illustration, as I say, is actually the life and example of the Buddha. You can't deny, whether it's Theravada Buddhism or any other form of Buddhism, that is the ideal. When you look at the stories, traditions, you must know that they are manifestations of a collective consciousness of the whole community, of the whole tradition. They don't suddenly pop up without any reasons. Understand? This is how the ancient Buddhists, after maybe more than you and I must say, right? After learning directly from the Buddha, that's how they felt about the Buddha's teaching, how they are affected. Yeah. So you have to see the explanation, interpretations, right, in the tradition, even though they are not expressed literally in the wording, right, as representing their insight and their understanding as Buddhist in ancient time. Yeah, from that point of view, very definitely. Yeah. If you can prove to me that Theravada Buddhism doesn't speak about integration and doesn't speak about, I hope I have proved to you, I don't know whether it's convincing or not, the whole idea of integration and harmonization in Buddhism, and the importance of the rational, the intellectual and the emotional. You can prove to me, then I will believe you. I give you examples of the five indriyas. You can see that. Panya is one. Saddha is another one. Right? And then Samadhi is one. Yeah? And then Vika is another one. And then mindfulness. You can look at the five indriyas in a sequential manner, but you can also look at it as a whole idea of integration of reason and emotion and harmony and integration. To explain what I mean. Now, if you have mindfulness, then that's a guiding force, right? Then you become mindful whether you are off the balance in terms of intellectual understanding, that is panya, or whether you are just blindly being faithful. So the faith represents the emotional aspect. Panya represents the intellectual aspect. These two have to be harmonized. Harmonized, as I said, under the guidance of mindfulness. Likewise, the other two, vigor, and samadhi, and one represents, if you like, the external dimension. The other represents the inner dimension. Even represents masculinity and femininity. The two aspects have to be, again, harmonized and integrated. Again, guided by mindfulness. So if you look at it this way, the ideal of the 5 indriyas is the ideal of integrations. Basically, of course, of various aspects, but basically, they boil down to this intellectual or understanding aspect on the one hand, and emotional aspect on the other.
Shall we pass the mic to a brother who is waiting here very patiently?
Then one last question. Just now you had the translation for you had this line about 4 xue something. I don't understand Chinese, so do you have an English translation for that?
I think it's more magical if you if you have your own understanding of it. I have already explained that. I have translated that indirectly, but let's give a chance to another person.
Yeah, this shall be the last question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante.
I can answer it better if you can. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I want to ask a question about the sequence of development that you mentioned. Is the former sequence, let's say bliss, leading to concentration and all this? This
sequence of what? Sorry.
The sequence of transmission from listening to the Dhamma, and inspiration and all this. Now, is the first, the leading one, is it a necessary condition for the subsequent one, or is a sufficient condition?
Well,
does it will it definitely lead to the next one naturally, or it is a prerequisite for this? And if it is a prerequisite only...
Well, first of all, it's a necessary condition, right? Whether it's necessary and sufficient, that depends on actually the degree. Yeah? So if you have, for instance, you're talking about necessary and sufficient, let's say your tranquility, it presupposes, right? It presupposes the existence of joy and the existence of insight, direct insight. But when you have only direct insight, it doesn't mean that it's necessary, but it is not sufficient that you will always have, right? Given A, you always have B, you see? So first of all, one is sufficient or the other, that's true. But then whether one particular link is a necessary and sufficient condition depends on your state, your attainment.
So if it is not a sufficient condition, it's necessary. I think if you read all these, all of them are the necessary condition for the next stage.
Okay, now supposing you say liberation, okay? When you have liberation, I would say it's a necessary and sufficient condition for true happiness, for joy, for insight. Yeah, but just having insight is necessary, but it doesn't imply that you immediately will get liberated. So that depends on your own particular case.
Okay. So the question is, then they will need to fill in the gap to accumulate the other necessary conditions. So to make it mature.
I would simplify it like this. Yeah, you have to lead you have to strive systematically. Step by step. This is why you're talking about necessity. Yeah, one leads to another and to another to another. Again, we can't look at these formulations in a too mechanical manner. Yeah, even if, for instance, you look at the Noble Eightfold Path or this particular sequence I've just given you. Yeah, you can't say first you start with right understanding and then right emotion and so on, and then right samadhi. Yeah, and yes, of course, this is a necessary sequence, but at the same time, as I said, it's more like a snowballing. Yeah, it's more like a spiral. Yeah, so your samadhi in the first round, right, leads to your samadhi in the second round, for instance. Yeah. So, in brief, however, you have to start from where you are. There is a sequence in starting with samadhi and then coming to samadhi, but that is not the whole story. On the basis of samadhi, there are different aspects like your behavior, your livelihood, your sincerity can improve also, should improve at that particular level, and then you come to a higher level. So in that sense, the Eightfold Paths are not necessarily sequential, but there is a sequence to begin with. You have to have a vision, yeah? You have to have a goal, and then you become motivated by your vision. That's second path. When you are motivated, then the whole process of transformation truly begins with the way you live, your livelihood, with your effort, how you are directing effort, your meditation, your mindfulness. So there is this sequence. But at a given time, you can concentrate on a particular aspect also. So if you do like that, it is not necessarily sequential. So don't understand these teachings in a mechanical manner too much, I think. Yeah. But understand that there is a rationale, there's a reason to give in a particular sequence.
Thank you.